Hi, Leisha. Welcome to the podcast.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
So, I'm excited to talk with you about hormones and just better understand, first and foremost, what symptoms that we should be aware of that are kind of coming up in our body, in our skin, in our food cravings, in our life to help us understand that it's hormone related and maybe not something else that we're trying to self diagnose on the internet.
Yeah, absolutely. So, hormone symptoms are going to be, they can be a little bit vague, and you can, as anyone who's listening has probably done a few Google searches themselves, you can find essentially evidence almost for any symptom being related to anything else. But with that being said, the things that I see that are most clear to me that are definitely hormone symptoms are going to be symptoms with your monthly cycle,
Mm.
particularly. So that's going to be things like PMS, like mood swings, anxiety, depression, sadness, anything outside of your normal mood, especially that comes in that week before your period. And that can be physical symptoms as well. So things like cramping, breast tenderness, hormonal acne, all of those things can come before your cycle too, bloating, any of those things that are cycle related, as well as symptoms with your period, like heavy periods, so heavy bleeding, but also heavy cramping, mood changes with your period itself, energy crashes with your period, brain fog, things that are really closely tied to that week before your cycle or before your period or during your period. Those are the ones that are the most clear. Now, with that being said, say having symptoms outside of that window doesn't mean that they're not hormone symptoms. Some women will have symptoms around ovulation that can be similar to those period symptoms, whether it's mood or physical. That's definitely hormone related as well, because your hormones are changing throughout the month, every single month. And just also to clarify, when we're talking about hormone symptoms, we're most focused on symptoms related to estrogen and progesterone versus you. So those are the ones that I'm talking about right now.
Got it. So, how do we start? So, if we are assuming that there's something wrong with our hormones because of what we're experiencing before or during our period, how do we then approach that? How do we need to get tests and what tests do we need to get done?
Yeah. Okay. So, what I have found over and over and over again is that when you have a hormone issue, and this is a little bit of an oversimplification, but really like a very general rule in my experience, is there's an issue with how your body is making hormones and or how your
Mm.
body is detoxifying hormones. And so it's essentially like, what ingredients do you need that you don't have to make hormones well, that you do not have to detoxify hormones well? Those are going to be the
Mm.
two things that I look at first every single time. And in my programs, that's step one and step two. And there are 6 steps, but step one and step two are, they cannot be ignored when we're looking at hormone issues. So when I'm looking at, does your body have what it needs to make hormones well? I'm looking at food first. And that for me, there's, as a chef, there's layers and layers with food. But my first things that I see are missing most often is, are you eating consistently? Are you eating real food? And are you eating enough? And almost always the answer to one or three of those questions is no when you're having hormone issues. And there's a huge link between stress hormones being imbalanced, overrun, lots of stress in your life, whether that's emotional, physical, chemical stress, and having hormone imbalances. And there's a reason for that, because your brain has a system that it works with your adrenal glands. It's called the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. It's essentially just how your brain is communicating with your adrenal glands. And that is what helps your body know whether you are safe or not safe, whether it needs to pump out more stress hormones or less. So that is being triggered every single day with every single decision you make. It's constantly on alert, essentially. And not in a bad way necessarily, but it can be in a bad way if you're constantly on alert and you're constantly triggered. Your adrenal glands are overworked, essentially. And in our modern culture, where we have so much like go, go, go mentality, so much stress, that can really be a huge issue essentially for women's health, because when we have all of this stress, our bodies are being given the signal, our brains are being given the signal that things are not safe. And so you can be getting that signal from not eating breakfast consistently and your blood sugar crashing every single morning, mid-morning. You can get the signal from that. You can get the signal from an actual terrible accident happening. You can get the signal from running late to work. All of those things are causing your adrenal glands to need to pump out more cortisol, stress hormone. And the way that your body makes sex hormones, estrogen and progesterone, is very closely tied. I would almost call these like sister systems. They're like right next to each other. They talk to each other all the time. They're BFFs. So they affect each other in a really big way. So your system to make hormones is your hypothalamus pituitary gonadal axis, which is connected to your ovaries in women. And so when your HPA axis for stress is like high alert, red alert, things are crazy, the sister of that is going to be like, let me help you. When things are crazy, we don't need to be having a baby. We don't need to be focusing on fertility. We need to slow things down, shut things down if needed. And I will even give you back some of the progesterone that I made to make more stress hormones if we're really in that bad of shape. So you can see that having not enough food, not consistency with food, that is going to trigger low blood sugar, which is truly an emergency in your body. Sugar in your cells, glucose in your cells for every single function. But to keep your brain alive, to keep your heart alive, to keep your muscles moving, you have to have enough glucose that is able to be transferred in your cells and that it's monitored in the blood. So even if you're just having blood sugar drops a couple times a day, that's a huge trigger for your stress system, and it will trigger and say, emergency alert, you don't have enough sugar to live right now. So that's going to spike your cortisol. Your body's going to save you, go into overdrive, and produce more sugar so that you can live a little bit longer. And while that sounds really dramatic, it is dramatic in your body. Like, that's a big deal if your body is constantly having to do that. And the other piece of that is that the liver is involved. And so if the liver is constantly having to save your life and give you enough sugar to keep going because you're not eating enough or the right foods or consistently, then it's not going to be detoxing hormones as well either. So this is where it gets tricky, but also simple. When we look at, we need to make sure that you're getting the ingredients you need. And that can be on a really basic level, getting, carbs and proteins balanced with your meals, getting consistent meals, eating enough food, eating in a way where your body is able to receive the signal that like, it's okay to slow down and digest my food. But then we can go, so much further from there too. So when we look at these basic steps, step 1 and step 2 of balancing hormones, we'll come back to the question of like, do you need testing? Well, it really, to me, it depends on what type of person you are. Do you need to see on paper that your hormones are a mess? Or do you not need to see on paper and you can come to me and say, my hormones are a mess, and I'm not doing step 1 and I'm not doing step 2, then we're going to need to work on that. And that is going to be the foundation of healing your hormones, no matter what your paper says, in my opinion. Now, with that being said, the testing that I personally do is Dutch testing. It is not the only good hormone testing, but it's the one that I like the most. And there's multiple different ways you can test hormones. You can test hormones in the blood. That can be helpful. You can test hormones in the urine. That's what I do. And you can also test hormones in the saliva. I have found that most doctors' offices, like OB doctors, they're going to do a blood test. That's kind of like the gold standard in traditional medicine. And that can be helpful information. I like urine testing because it can give us the same numbers as far as like what's going on, like how much estrogen do you have at this part of your cycle, how much progesterone do you have, how much testosterone do you have, and then it also adds on a full adrenal panel, which is typically not happening when you're just getting your estrogen and progesterone tested in blood. And because it's in your urine, we can see the metabolites and how your body is breaking down these hormones, which is, in my opinion, one of the most helpful things we see on this test is not only like, okay, yes, you do have estrogen dominance or you don't have enough progesterone or, whatever we're seeing, but then but what's your body doing with the estrogen you do have? I find that that's very valuable information, and we don't get that from blood testing or saliva testing. So that's why I like the Dutch test, as well as ease of access. We send it to your house. You pee on some strips on the right day of your cycle, and then you mail it back in. You don't have to be there for a fasting blood draw. You don't have to get your blood drawn. That can be stressful. So I love that testing. I think it's really helpful. It's fun for me because as a nurse, I have this background and I want to see the numbers and see the things. And testing will not fix your hormones. It will just be a tool in the journey. And if we have clarity, like, oh, you really aren't detoxing well, we can focus on that more. If we have clarity, wow, you really don't have any progesterone, we can focus on that more. And if you're coming to me and you don't have the ingredients for hormones, you don't have the ingredients to detox hormones, that is always going to help move you in the right direction, whether we know your exact estrogen levels or not.
This is so interesting to me because my big takeaway is you can't get around an unbalanced lifestyle, that it's so much more than the food, that you really have to, you can't necessarily control the stress, but you can control how much you schedule in a day. And we all need to start to buffer in more downtime.
Yeah, I think it really is sobering when we look at how we live our lives and what our bodies actually need. And I am guilty, for lack of a better word, of like having a busy life. And I do believe, and I know this for a fact, you can have balanced hormones, and, balance is always going to be a balancing act. It's not like you just get balanced and then you stay there forever, but you can have symptom-free cycles. You can have steady energy. You can have optimal weight and, good libido and joyful moods. You can have all of these things within a busy life, but it does take intention, and it does take essentially like being willing to make some investments and sacrifice, whether that's time or money or both, most likely. But can you have optimally balanced hormones if you're stressed the heck out all the time, you never sleep, you don't eat real food, and like you're just running on fumes? I would say no, probably not. And there may be women who are living like that aren't having period symptoms, but that doesn't mean they're in optimal health.
So one thing that you mentioned that I'm really fascinated by as someone who's had melasma on and off for many years is the inability to detox some of the hormones. So I think, what's typical with melasma is you have a lot of estrogen that you're not releasing. So it's now being stored in the skin. What is stopping our bodies from being able to properly detox our hormones?
Okay, that's a great question. So the two organs that are going to be kind of like biggest influence on detox, and then I've already thought of two other organ systems that are involved as well, as I said too. But essentially, like, I look first at liver function, and then I look at the gut, but then I also am going to look at thyroid function and the lymphatic system. So there are multiple ways that our body is detoxing on a daily basis. It's really good at it. It's doing it all the time. When I see issues with detoxification, it can be from a few different reasons. Number one, if we think of detoxification as like a bathtub, like you're filling up a bathtub and all of a sudden it's overflowing. When the bathtub is overflowing, you're having symptoms. We have to do two things. We have to turn off the flow of water, and we have to unplug the drain. And so if you have a high flow of estrogen coming in from potentially a stressful lifestyle, your body is creating more estrogen. You can create more estrogen significantly overweight because your fat cells will create more estrogen. You can create more estrogen if your body products contain a lot of estrogen-like substances, and you're using a lot of plastics in your life. Like, there's a lot of environmental, essentially, toxins that can increase estrogen. And those can be, body products that you thought were just normal. It can be lotions and shampoos and perfumes and all of the things. As women, we typically put a lot more on our bodies than men do. So that can cause estrogen to be higher. And then when we look at the other side, like draining the bathtub, really good regular bowel movements. If your digestion is off, your digestion is slowed, you have a lot of inflammation in your gut, those are going to be things that are essentially like the drain is plugged. And I know this isn't like, it's a little TMI, but here we are. But also when we're looking at the liver, blood sugar imbalance can be huge for the liver not to function well, because it doesn't have essentially the focus to be able to focus on detoxification when it's always over there trying to save your life and balancing your blood sugar. And when we look at liver function, there can be, multiple factors involved, but essentially like you need to have adequate mineral health to be able to have your liver function well. If your liver is just overburdened by those things coming in, it can just be kind of slowed down. There are multiple medications. Birth control can slow down the liver. And so many of us have been on birth control long term. So there's antibiotics. There's a lot of things that can slow down the liver. The good news is when we know that and we know like, okay, I need to support my liver by balancing my blood sugar. I need to give my liver maybe some herbal support as well. I need to consider like doing some lifestyle measures, like castor oil packs can be really supportive for the liver. We can start to support those organs, and there's so many ways you can support the liver. There's so many foods that you can use to support the liver. So we can start to support the liver, but our lymphatic system is also really important for detoxification. And the lymphatic system is like essentially like a ton of little vessels under your skin that carry lymphatic fluid. And it's really important for detoxification as well as immune function. And that is a passive system. And when we are thinking about like, okay, what does that mean? It's almost like you have all of these little veins and arteries in your lymphatic system, but with veins and arteries, your heart is connected to them and it's an active pump system. So your heart is pumping, it's pushing blood all the way down to your toes, and all of your veins have little valves in them. So when your heart beats, it's pressurized and it's like helping get the blood back to your heart. The lymphatic system doesn't have that. And so the lymphatic system can be overburdened by similar things like toxins. I didn't even talk about like pesticides on your foods. There's so many things that can be overburdening your detox organs, but the lymphatic system doesn't have the heart pumping. It doesn't have valves. It needs help to move. So if you have a sedentary lifestyle, if you're not drinking enough liquids, if you're not supporting your lymphatic system by sweating and moving, then you can have kind of like a buildup of toxins there too. And essentially like your body can just get kind of overburdened. And then one more thing with melasma is there can be a connection between estrogen and iron toxicity. And iron toxicity, could be a whole other topic, but sometimes that shows up in our skin as like age spots, even like moles, the red moles, melasma, things like that, that it's like your body is trying to get something out. And so if you have iron, essentially like dysregulation, it may not look like anemia, but it could just be that you have had over adequate intake of iron that is more synthetic, and that can be stored in your cells as well. And so it's really your body trying to move that out, but that would be, again, really supporting those detox organs can make a huge difference. And that can be a daily practice. I'm not talking about do a big liver cleanse once a year. Like I'm talking about daily, weekly, monthly, supporting those organs, and then you'll see really good changes over time.
When you are working with clients to change their diet, their food choices to improve or balance their hormones, where do you have to start with most clients? Like what are they eating and what are you trying to move them towards?
So I actually have, over the last couple of years, I have a lot of my clients come to me in a place where like they're already eating well, but they can't see what they can't see, essentially. And so it really does come down to those first three things that I mentioned before. Are you eating breakfast? Is it real food? Is it balanced? Making sure that you're balancing carbs and protein together. I feel like most of the time, I really try to oversimplify things because the women that I work with, myself included, are busy, lots of things on their plate. And so oversimplifying, where I'm not talking about, even like proteins, carbs, and fat being balanced, just balancing the protein and carbs, making sure they're getting enough protein, that it's good quality protein, and that they're balancing with some healthy carbs along with it. That goes a huge long way to be able to balance blood sugar, which increases capacity, which then we can start to focus on like, okay, and we can add fiber, and we can make sure we're getting mineral rich, nutrient dense foods, but really like coming away from the mindset of like, I have to do this perfectly, and back to the mindset of like, I can do one thing and it's going to help, and then I'll do the next thing and it's going to help more. That's really where I start, is like, let's do a big assessment. I do a very big assessment of like, where are you actually? So it's different for every person, but those are some of the first action steps almost every time.
So a lot of people have a challenge with choosing a healthy breakfast because there's a lot of noise around breakfast. What's a healthy breakfast to you, and what are some of the different types of breakfasts you like to have?
So I would say breakfast is probably my biggest challenge as well. Just finding enough variety with it. But typically we will do something like some eggs, maybe another type of protein as well, because I think it's maybe not so common to know, but like eggs only have like 6 to 7 grams of protein each. And so you would have to eat quite a few eggs to even be getting 20 grams of protein for breakfast, which I love to try to get at least 20. And then maybe some like chicken sausage or
Mm.
something like that on the side.
Yeah.
And then if we do, we'll either do usually like sweet potatoes or potatoes, and then try to do some kind of fruit as well to get a little bit of extra nutrients, antioxidants. So some variety of that is our breakfast a lot of times, whether it's like an egg bake or it's scrambled eggs, or sometimes we'll do like eggs with sourdough and avocado. But eggs, I would say, are kind of the basis of our breakfast a lot of times. And then if my kids really want like oatmeal, I know that oatmeal is considered a healthy breakfast, but I also see that there are a lot of issues with blood sugar when you're just eating oatmeal for breakfast. So if we do something like oatmeal, I try to soak it and properly prepare it. I will try to sneak some like vanilla protein powder into it a lot of times, or some collagen just to like boost it a little bit. And then we'll usually have like a protein on the side, like some sausage or something like that. And then try to get some fruit as well. That's another option that we have. And then who knows from there. There's definitely some other breakfasts, but those are some of the most basic, I'd say.
Yeah, they sound delicious. I'm in. Now, when your clients come to you and they know they need to get off birth control or they just have, is there a protocol that you need to put them on to, help get what's in that birth control out of them? Is it just going to take time? Is there something you have to do to your body to support transitioning off of that? Or is it just good enough that you've stopped using the pill?
So essentially, when I have someone come to me who's like, I want to get off birth control, or I just got off of birth control, the things that I consider are birth control can decrease your mineral status. So they're probably going to need some replenishing. It definitely depends how long you've been on it. Has it been 10 years or 1 year? There's definitely the range. So we're going to support minerals. It can imbalance gut bacteria. It can slow down the liver. So those are going to be the things that I focus on most, is how can we support these? And so if you are like, I want to get off birth control sometime this year, you can start doing those things right away. You can start making sure that you're nourishing your body well, you're getting minerals, your liver is supported, your gut is supported, so that the transition is easier. Sometimes we'll start with some support, because a lot of times if you've been on birth control and you've been on it for 10 years, it's like a scary thing to get off of it because you don't even know who you are without birth control.
Mm-hmm.
And that can go way deeper than you think it can, I think. There's a book called Your Brain on Birth Control. There's just a little it touches, including like our emotions, our romantic attraction. Like there's so much that it affects, because when you change women's hormones, you are changing the woman. So with that being said, we will do essentially, like if someone comes to me and they not just, but they just have like PMS and bad periods, but they haven't been on birth control in 5+ years. That's, kind of like its own layer. But if they come to me and they're like, I just got off birth control, or I want to get off birth control and I have these same symptoms, it's almost like, okay, we're just going to elevate what we do a little bit more, because your body is going to need more support in all of the same areas, or maybe longer support.
How do we get minerals?
So,
How do you like your clients to get minerals?
well, I think that again, it's really going to depend on the person and like how much of an easy button they need. But there's a lot of minerals that you can get directly through food. So that's going to be my first recommendation, is doing like mineral rich drinks like bone broth, coconut water. There's a lot of fruits that contain a lot of minerals. There are a lot of vegetables that contain a lot of minerals, but even really good quality meats and organ meats, those are going to be super rich in minerals too. So really, like we can get so much through our food, and depending on where you are, sometimes we can add in some additional supplementation. I love adrenal cocktails for mineral support, and you can make that, very whole food based, or you can do it as a powder. And sometimes I will also recommend things like electrolyte powders that are clean, because sometimes you just need that extra boost, or you have a busy lifestyle where you need to take a packet with you. But I would always prefer that we do as much as possible through food.
Let's talk about the adrenal cocktail. I used to take that, and it does make a huge difference. How do you like to put together your adrenal cocktail?
So the most basic recipe would be like some coconut water, good quality orange juice, whatever the best quality is that you can get. And then you can do some sea salt, and that's kind of like the basic recipe. I actually
Mhm.
really like using the Jigsaw adrenal cocktail powder sometimes as well. And I'll just add that to orange juice. And I really like it with like a little bit of half and half or coconut cream because it makes it kind of more like a dreamsicle type recipe. So I'll add that a lot of times to either recipe that I use. But the main components are the sodium, potassium, and vitamin C. And the reason actually that I like doing the jigsaw powder is that it has some additional whole food vitamin C. And so I just like getting that extra boost on top of the orange juice for my vitamin C. And sometimes it's nice to just have the scoop, but I like to do it either way.
Have you tried the version where it's the orange juice, the sea salt, and the cream of tartar?
I have.
And what do you think of that one? What are you getting out of the cream of tartar?
I honestly don't like the taste of it as much, but it's potassium in the cream of tartar, which who knew? I just thought cream of tartar was like a random ingredient that I
Yeah,
never had for cookies when I was younger.
exactly. And who would have thought that it has so much more to offer us in regards to the health world?
Mhm.
Well, if someone's, for those that are tuning in and they're thinking, I really want to dive deeper into hormone health, this really fascinates me. Can you share a little bit more about like what your training is, where you learn this information? So if people want to explore this in a deeper way, they know some places they can go.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my most formal training is that I went to nursing school. So, I'm a registered nurse and I worked in the hospital for about 10 years. Didn't learn anything about hormones there. Maybe like my understanding of the endocrine system is better because of all of the anatomy and physiology and all of the learning about that in nursing school that I did. And I feel like blood sugar regulation, those things I did definitely learn in nursing school. But then I went to get my certification when I decided I wanted to move into more of the natural health space. I got a certification from Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. And that is an online course essentially to equip you to understand more of the nutritional aspect, as well as it has actually a pretty good amount of anatomy and physiology as well, understanding essentially like how the body is working on a more functional level and with very much a focus on food, sleep, lifestyle, and kind of like looking at the whole picture. And then I chose that program because it allowed me as a nurse, or you don't have to be a nurse to take that program, but without being a doctor, working under a doctor to do functional lab work. And so that was important to me because I do like to see the numbers. I have a lot of clients who really like to see those numbers as well. And it really validates the feelings that you have when you know you have symptoms and you're not getting answers. You're going to the doctor and they're like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine. Your labs are normal. It's really helpful to be able to dive into the hormone testing that I talked about, mineral testing, gut testing, and see what's going on under the surface. And sometimes that can be like kind of the jump start that someone needs to say, I was right. Like I knew I was, but like you're the first person who's heard me and shown me that something's actually gone on in my body. So I went to functional. I've also gotten certification from the root cause protocol, which is more related to minerals and iron and things like that. And
Yeah.
all of that to say, truly, mostly what I've learned about hormones has come through my own just like searching things out and taking different courses that weren't even like practitioner level courses, reading different books. I loved learning about the metabolism first, but some of the books that I've really loved are Taking Charge of Your Fertility. That's a
Mm.
really great resource on understanding your cycle and your hormones better. I love the book How to Heal Your Metabolism. I love the book Deep Nutrition. Those are all books that have been really helpful as I've learned. But I think it's all really been like just building on the foundations that I have. And I've been really thankful to be able to focus enough in one area to learn a lot about it. Because I think when we're trying to do all the things all the time, it's hard to get good at anything.
Absolutely. Well, if someone's approaching, working with you or somebody to balance their hormones, how long should we expect that could take?
So I personally love to expect that I'm going to see some really good changes within the first 3 to 4 months. A lot of times we see some great changes in energy, maybe anxiety, things like that within the first 2 weeks to a month. But to see changes in your hormone cycles, it typically does take 3 to 4 months because it takes that long for an egg to mature in your ovaries. It takes that long for hormone changes to happen in the body. 4 months, you will have arrived at this perfect place where you have no symptoms, but typically you're very clear that you're moving in the right direction. And then like 6 months down the road, you're like, okay, symptoms are mostly gone. A year down the road, you can't even really remember the symptoms you used to have. That's the type of progression I typically see.
Then that's so interesting because that mirrors a lot of what you and I were talking about on your podcast episode, which is seasons. And it takes essentially a season for your body to regain that balance.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think it is so interesting to see like those seasons of healing.
Yeah. And it's just such a good reminder that we can't expect fast results. We can want fast results, but we really need to give our body time to adjust,
Yeah.
And if we can give our bodies a little time to adjust, it's going to get there.
And I think when we're all in search of this like quick fix, it can be so easy to be like, okay, I'm just going to try this. Like I always call it like the Happy Flow supplement. I might be like really giving a bad name to the Happy Flow supplement. I don't know if there's a real one called that, but it's like, you see these ads on Instagram and you're like, oh, that might fix everything. Oh, that might fix everything, whether it's skincare or a supplement or this one superfood powder. But like really the truth is your body needs consistency. It needs patience. It needs like to be fed well to be able to do what it needs to do. And our bodies were made to heal and they were made to work well. But sometimes we just don't even realize that we're essentially like giving them nothing that they need and hoping that they'll work really well.
Are there any lifestyle edits that people can make right now while they're waiting to get lab results back or they're waiting to approach someone like you to do lab work with? What are some things that they can start doing now that are really easy just to improve their hormone health?
So anything that is going to improve your stress or improve your nutrition, those are going to be huge. So getting sunlight in your eyes in the morning with no glasses or contacts, getting outside and walking, moderating your activity, whether that means increasing from nothing or decreasing from super high intensity. For women, especially with hormone issues, that's typically not ideal because it is another stressor. That doesn't mean you can only take a walk, but it just means you need to be listening to what your body's capacity is. So asking yourself truly, like, what are my biggest stressors right now? And being open to the ability to change them and not just feeling stuck where you are. That is huge. And then anything that you can do to support detoxification really gently, that can always be helpful too. And maybe that just is changing out some of your products. If you're like, oh, I'm just using like normal toothpaste and face wash and deodorant and shampoo from Target, then maybe you start to do a little bit of research. And it doesn't mean you can't maybe still get it at Target. They might have some cleaner options, but you need to pay attention to what you're putting in your body and on your body.
Absolutely. Well, where can people get in touch with you, follow you, learn more about you?
So my favorite place to hang out with you is the Happily Hormonal Podcast. I'm there every week, twice a week. I also have an Instagram. I am not there every week, twice a week, but I'm there sometimes, and that is at Leisha Drews. And then my website is leishadrews.com. So those are all great places to reach out. And if you DM me on Instagram, to be clear, I will get back to you. I do go on there often enough to do that, but I'm not there posting all the time.
Yeah, your website's a really great resource. I really like all the information that you have on there. It's really useful, and you have great products on there as well for people that are looking for the lifestyle edits.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I learned so much. For me, the biggest takeaway is I really need to edit some more downtime. And when you can let your body rest, everything else will kind of come into flow. So thank you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. And I think it's always with seasons, it's always going to be a consistent process of like what's going on in the season and what does my body need.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.